Today's lecture deals with the producer surplus and consumer surplus. And these concepts are going to be used to prove that the most beneficial position for the society, for the economy, for consumers and producers is for the price to be at equilibrium. Sometimes the government sets prices above equilibrium, sometimes below equilibrium. And we will show how these interventions into the market are actually going to take away from either consumer surplus or producer surplus, and very often even create what we call dead weight. So first, let's define a consumer surplus. Consumer surplus is the difference between how much you would have been willing to pay for a particular item and how much you actually will pay given the equilibrium price in the market. If you're looking at the producer surplus, it's a similar situation whereby a producer is able to produce an item at, let's say, $5, and that particular item may be selling for $10, then the producer has a producer surplus of the difference, or $5. So let's look more carefully at how this would be represented on a graph. So here's your demand and your supply, and this is your equilibrium price of $10, equilibrium quantity of 8 units. The area in blue under your demand curve and above the equilibrium price is what we call the consumer surplus. So this is all that you are gaining because you were willing to pay more than the market price. On the other hand, the producer surplus is going to be the area under the price and above the supply curve. So this point represents, let's say, producers, maybe 3 producers, who are able to sell or to produce at, let's say, $6, but they are going to be selling it at 10 because that's the market price. So that difference is their producer surplus. And we said that the government could intervene and create either a shift to the benefit of the consumer or a shift and a benefit to the producer. So here we're looking, excuse me, we're looking at a situation of a price floor. That price is set above equilibrium, and a price floor is to help producers. And indeed, you will see that in a situation of equilibrium, you would have been at $10 with a quantity of 8 units. Now, the price that is set by the government is $14. But if the price is set at 14, will consumers buy 8, 12, or 4? Well, at a price of 14, consumers, according to the demand curve, will only want 4 units. Now, what has happened is that the consumer surplus shrunk, because right now it would be only that area right here, under the demand, above the price. Now that whole area from the blue under the demand curve used to be your consumer surplus. Now that part right here, this square or rectangle, $10 to 14, so that's $4 times 4, $16, that area right here, was transferred from consumers to the producers. On the other hand, that area right here, DL, it's dead loss, because this is going to be gained neither by consumer nor by producer. So you can see that since you have a dead loss, not only from consumers, because that part, DL, was part of your consumer surplus. Remember the previous graph. Now this DL, dead loss, used to be part of the producer surplus, but it's not going to be part of money that they're going to be getting. So both consumers and producers lose a certain part that is deadweight loss, and part of the consumer surplus right here is going to be transferred to producers. Indeed, this would be in a situation like in agriculture, where the government is trying to help out producers, farmers, and therefore increase the price that they are selling at. Now, how about if the government is trying to help the consumers, and when they do that, they are going to be putting a price ceiling, and the price ceiling is going to be below equilibrium. So again, at equilibrium, you would have been at $10 and at 8 units. Now the government says, no, we're going to be putting the price at 7. Well, at 7, producers will only want to supply 5 units. So now what happens? Remember, the consumer surplus would have been the area above this line and below that line. Well, what is happening right now is that part of the producer surplus, which would have been below the blue line of $10 and above the supply curve, this part is going to be transferred to the consumers. And again, we have deadweight loss both from consumers as well as from producers. So we are losing out. With price ceilings, examples of that would be something like rent control, ways whereby we can keep the prices artificially high to help consumers afford these particular items. There is also a situation where we're going to be looking at imports, and that would be in the chapter on international trade. But since we're also looking at a shift of your consumer and producer surplus, let's look at what is happening with respect to imports. So for this situation, if there was no imports, then the local supply and the local demand would have been setting a price of $10 and a quantity of 8 units. If we add imports, then those goods are going to be sold at the global price, not the internal market price. We're opening up. So now let's say that on international markets, that particular item sells for $8 per unit, and that's lower than the $10 that you would have had to pay in the local market. Do you think consumers or producers gain from imports? Well, since imports are going to give you a higher quantity of goods that you can consume, therefore it is going to be to the benefit of consumers. And indeed, you see that the price is lower, and right now the quantity demanded is 12 units, and yes, indeed, the international market can supply 12 units, because that becomes like the supply of the global supply, or the supply by all countries put together. So now what happens? Well, this area used to be your consumer surplus. Well, consumers still have this same consumer surplus, but they also win 2 areas right here, because that triangle was not produced before. Now here, with respect to this area, this is something that the consumers are gaining from the producers. It used to be producer surplus right here. Now it has become a consumer surplus. So where is the producer surplus right now as a result of imports? Well, it's a very, very small amount, and that would be that area right here. That would be your producer surplus. When looking at international trade, we looked at imports, but we also know that the government is going to be collecting a tax on some products, and taxes on imports are called tariffs. So how does a situation of a tariff look on a graph right here? You have again a demand and a supply, and that price of $6 is the original world price. This is the price that the items are selling for, and as a result, there is a large influx, 20 units extra that are being added to the production at home, actually to the consumption at home, because the production at home at $6 will only be of 4 units, yet we are able to get, we are demanding 24, and we can get 24. Remember, these are all the imports coming into the country. But now the government says, okay, we would like to levy a tariff or a tax on imports. As a result, the price is going to be going up. It's going up from $6 to $8. So that is the extent of the tariff. Now what happens? Well, since the price is higher, then producers are willing to right now produce not only 4 but 8. And as a result, they are going to be getting a certain amount of producer surplus. So that area right here, from $6 to $8 and under the supply curve, this area right here is however much the producers were able to gain from the fact that now those goods are more expensive. At the same time, the government is putting, is receiving revenue, and the revenue for the government is going to be this area right here, this rectangle. So they're getting $2 on 12 units, and that will be the government's revenue from taxing the imports into the country. At the same time, we are going to have a deadweight loss right here, this triangle, as well as this deadweight loss. So these are elements that nobody is going to win, but the government will have gained some revenue, and producers will have gained some producer surplus, because right now prices have gone up. So as a summary to this particular lecture about, so as a summary to this lecture about consumer surplus and producer surplus, you need to know how to define consumer surplus and producer surplus. It is something that consumers were willing to spend but didn't have to because the price was lower. And by the same token, it's money that producers are getting above what they expected to get based on the production costs. We looked at how price floors and price ceilings transferred some of the producer surplus or consumer surplus to the other party, but at the same time also showed that we were going to experience a deadweight loss. On an international level, taking into consideration international trade, we have seen that imports into the country are going to be benefiting consumers, because now their consumer surplus is growing, since on the one hand they are going to be paying lower prices, and also they are going to be able to buy more units. The producer surplus is going to shrink, because now they are competing with international products. We also looked at what happens when you have a tariff that is imposed, and you will see that with a tariff it is going to create government revenue, and also it is going to increase producer surplus. So keep in mind that this is one way of proving that your best bet, no deadweight loss, and a maximum amount of consumer surplus and producer surplus will take place when we are able to price at the market price with the forces of demand and supply. Thank you.